So the Taliban right now is the government of Afghanistan. They filled the vacuum left by the departure of US troops in 2021. They now run the country. But of course, they used to run the country in the past as well, before the arrival of international troops in the aftermath of those horrific attacks on September 11, 2001. There was a 20-year period after that, of course, when there were successive US-backed Afghan governments. With the departure of the US and other international troops, they're now back in power in Kabul and running this country again. But their history goes back much further. The Taliban really comes about following the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. And in the early 90s is when this group sort of starts to become sort of visible to reporters on the ground, to analysts on the ground. The word itself means students in the Pashto language. And they eventually end up taking over Afghanistan in the mid-1990s, and over the years impose a very strict, very austere version of Sharia or Islamic law across the country. This, encompasses things like an almost total erasure of freedoms for women. They're not able to be educated, they cannot work. But also other things. We saw in 2001, for instance, you'll remember the blowing up of those giant statues of the Buddha in Bamiyan province in Afghanistan. That was the then Taliban government, just before they were displaced. So that's where the group comes from. The new Taliban government that is running Afghanistan today, when it came to power, there were many people around the world who held the view that this will be a moderate Taliban government, more moderate than the one that we saw pre-2001. There were many people who disagreed with them and who said, no, the group hasn't changed, it's a militant group. But there were people who said that, look, they will be more moderate this time when they come to power. And one of the things that's happened since the departure of US troops in the summer of 2021 is that we have seen this new Taliban government actually become more and more conservative over time. So one of the things they do soon after they take power, despite promises to allow women to play an active role in society, one of the things they do is that they immediately bar most adolescent girls from attending high school. They kept saying for months and months that they would change that decree, but in fact what's happened is at the end of last year they issued 2 new decrees. One of them was banning women from attending university, so they cannot get higher education. The other was banning female aid workers. And that's had a massive fallout for the entire population, because it's led to the pulling out of various aid organizations who say they cannot operate any longer unless their female employees are allowed to work on the ground. And this, of course, comes in the midst of a massive humanitarian catastrophe. This new Taliban government is really, in the words of many of the people that we have spoken to, looks a lot like the old Taliban, that there is no moderate Taliban. The world has responded by, of course, condemning these very conservative decrees, right? We've seen condemnation from various quarters. Governments around the world have condemned it. But the larger picture, if you zoom out, was that in the aftermath of the departure of international troops, one of the reasons that the money was held back from the Taliban government, they don't get the aid that used to underpin the previous successive Afghan governments. They're also not able to access the money that was held in reserve in international banks by previous Afghan governments, and that also runs into billions of dollars. And there was this argument that this would be a thing that would allow the international community to have leverage over the Taliban, right? A moderating sort of influence. That hasn't come to pass. And so where the international community really finds itself now is with very little leverage, really. I mean, if you're honest about it, very little leverage over a government that is becoming, by the day, by the month, more conservative, and looks much, much more of a problem every single day